Hello, glad to see you back. Last time we added this button to follow a user, but we left pending the option to unfollow it. So we're gonna come here to the queries.sql file, and at the bottom, we're gonna write a new query to delete a user follow relationship. So we delete it by passing the follower ID and the followed ID, and we return the time when it was deleted. So we're gonna come here to the service and we're gonna copy the method to follow a user and we're gonna rename it to unfollow. So here it's gonna be pretty similar. So we validate the user ID, we check if we are authenticated, we do this check so we cannot unfollow ourselves. Then we check if the follow exists, but this time, if it doesn't exist, we're gonna return early. So if we are not following the user and we try to unfollow it again, we just return with nil, so it's the opposite. Then we check if the user exists. Maybe this one, we can move it higher up, this part. If we don't do that, this code will be useless because on this part, we will always return before we check the user ID. And then here, instead of creating the user follow, we're gonna delete it. There, and we need to update the follow count, but this time we're gonna decrease it, so -1 here and -1 here too. All right, that's it. To test this, we're gonna do the same. We're gonna copy the test for the follow user and we're gonna rename all the calls to unfollow. All right, so we need to check for the valid user ID, unauthenticated. This is if we try to unfollow ourselves. The user not found, and we reach the OK case. For this one, I will first insert the follow. So we first follow the user and then we unfollow it, and we expect no error. Same for this case, we need to follow the user first. So we follow the user, then we unfollow it, and we unfollow again, and we expect no error. And for the follow counts, the same again. We need to follow the user first. So on this part, we expect the follow count to be 1 and then back to 0. So in these asserts, we need to check for it to be 0. All right, I think that's it. Let's give it a try. All right, perfect. All right, now we can unfollow a user. So ideally, this button should toggle to a unfollow text, or maybe following, something like that. So here's the button in the user page template. So here we need to know if we are following this user. For that, we're gonna add a new property. So this is the query we use to fetch a user by its username. And here I'm gonna add a new field. So inside of this parenthesis, I'm gonna compute a new field. That's gonna be a Boolean to tell if we are following the user. And inside of here, I'm gonna put the same query we have here at this one. We check if we are following the user. So I'm gonna copy and paste it right here. The follower ID is gonna be the authenticated user ID, and the followed is gonna be this user, which is the one from the select. But now this follower is required. So I'm gonna make this optional by wrapping this in a case statement. I'm gonna cut it. So when the follower ID is not empty, only then we're gonna execute our query like this. Otherwise, we're gonna return false. So if we're not authenticated, we don't pass the follower ID, we're not following the user basically. All right, I think that's it. Let's run SQL generate. And now we get some errors. So here, before to this query, we were passing just a username. But now we expect a struct. So now we pass the follower ID, which we need to fix this. This should be a string. So we're gonna come to the query, and here we're gonna add some data type. All right, that's fixed. The follower ID is now a string. So let's fix these calls. There, let's copy this. Here we need to fix it too. There. And now we get this different error. So before we were returning a user type, and now this function returns a user by username row. So we need to fix this there. And now we got a different error. Here, the assertion, we're using a user type, and here's a user by username row. So again, I'm gonna compare this to using the ID maybe. The email, username, created that. Yeah, that should be good. And here too, we expect a user. So we need to change this type. And there we go. All right, now we need to come here to the user service, and on the user by username method, here to the call, we need to pass the follower ID, which is gonna be the authenticated user ID. Like this. So we read the user from the context, and we use the ID as the follower ID. Notice that we are ignoring the second Boolean value. We normally use it to check if we are authenticated, but on this case it's optional. So this is gonna return an empty user and an empty ID. So this is gonna be an empty string. So yeah, basically optional. So now we can come here to the button and say if the user is being following by us, we show following. Otherwise, just follow, like this. So this is the new property that was added to the user by username row. Let's check it. So here, user by username row, and at the bottom, there is the new field we added. So this is a Boolean, and that's the one we are using here. There we go, we are following the user. And if we hit it again, we can follow the user many times, but ideally this should toggle. So let's do that. I'm gonna come here to the form, and I would like to change the method from post to be a delete request. So we're gonna pass an input hidden with the name method, and the value is gonna be delete. We're gonna include this input only if we are following the user. You must know that forms, HTML forms, only support post requests and get requests. So you cannot change it here. Maybe you could something like this, for example. So if we are following the user, you do a delete request or a post request. You might be tempted to do something like this, but this is not gonna work because delete is not supported. That's the reason we are doing that inside an extra input, and we pass the value here. There is this nice blog post by Alex explaining this, and at the end there is this middleware for Go to override the method. So we're gonna copy this one and put it here in our handler. So basically this middleware is gonna check if the request method is a post request, and it's gonna read the method from the input, and if the method is a valid method, it's gonna override it in the request. This one also has this fallback to read it from the header, but I don't think we need this part, so I'm gonna remove it. So yeah, now in the handler here, in the list of middlewares, we're gonna add it like so. So now if we refresh the page, we can inspect the form, and there is our hidden input with the value of delete. So still the form is gonna do a post request, but our middleware is gonna read this value and it's gonna replace the request method to be a delete request. So now we can come here to the handler, and here we're gonna add the delete method handler. And in this case, we're gonna unfollow the user. So let's create this handler. I'm gonna copy the existing one to follow a user and call it unfollow. And this one is gonna call our unfollow user service. There we go. The rest is the same. So let's give it a try. So we're following the user if I hit it, now it's toggled back. And we can see on the form that the input method is not there. So it's gonna do a post request now. And back. All right, I think I need to display here on the user profile the follow count. Let's do that. So maybe below the username, I'm gonna add a detail list. Like this. Let's give it a try. So there we go. John has 1 follower. If I go to my profile, I am following 1 user. If I unfollow, John now has 0 followers, and I, on my profile, I'm following no users. Now that we have the option to follow and unfollow users, I think it's time to start working on the timeline. The timeline is gonna be a list of the posts from the people you follow. Because right now we are displaying all the posts from the entire system. So that's what we're gonna do on the next episode. Make sure to leave any comment down below. There is also a new Slack channel you can join. The link to join is on the video description, so you are very much welcome. And yeah, I'm gonna see you on the next episode. See ya.